welcome to the Snowies camping show with Ben and Lauren, or Lauren and Ben. Which way do you reckon sounds better?
Whatever. I got nothing.
Lauren and Ben. Ben and Lauren. Ben and Lauren. I think Ben and Lauren works.
No, it depends who does the intro. Whoever
Yeah.
the intros gets priority.
Ben and
At
Lauren.
the end of that, it really doesn't matter. I haven't stopped to think about it, actually.
Yeah.
We're both here.
We're both here as
On
usual.
every episode.
Every
Sometimes
episode.
there's extras.
We've never done an episode with just one of us.
No, it'd be
And
weird.
It would be weird. Who do we talk to? No, but I mean one of us and a guest. We've never done it. You and me, mate. You and me.
Yeah. I'd be lost.
Ride or die.
Wouldn't know what to do.
Right. So
Yeah.
we ran a competition in the Facebook page. Technically not a competition because nobody won anything. And
Which is the second time
which
we've
is
run a
the second
competition
time
that we haven't
yeah.
had a prize
No,
for.
realistically, you would have heard our setup episodes previously.
Hope so.
Yep, because that's the order that we're doing all of these things in. And we mentioned, if you haven't heard those episodes already, jump back and listen to them. But we mentioned that in this competition in ellipses or whatever you call these fingers, what do you call them?
That's your pointer finger and your middle finger
Yeah,
on each
the
hand.
Quotation marks. They're
yeah.
like 66.99 things. Competition. Was suggest an episode idea, and whichever one got the most interactions on the Facebook platform was chosen for us to do an episode on. But there were two that got exactly the same amount of interactions.
Yep.
So instead of having to pick, we just chose to do both of them. So we've done the other ones, which was your setup and my setup. And now we're going on to One Pot Wonders.
There's also a bunch of other great topics.
And I think they're all boss.
Yeah.
We've noted a lot of them. A lot of them we actually already have in the pipeline, which is cool. But yeah, today's is the second winner, ellipses.
Which will be the third episode.
Quotation mark 66.99 winner.
We did an episode for your setup and an episode for my setup. So there's actually 3 episodes.
I know, but this is the second
Irrelevant
theme,
information.
Content.
Mm.
Stop waffling.
I don't waffle, you waffle.
One Pot Wonders.
One Pot Wonders.
So this is Jenny Lethbridge's suggestion. So
Thanks,
thank you, Jenny. Basically, it's things that you cook when you're camping, whether it be on the campfire or on the stove, that you just can chuck in one pot, and it's just one pot.
Easy wash up.
Easy wash up, easy done, easy prep, easy.
Yep. And so you and I have got a few ideas.
We've got a few ideas.
A bit of a call around Snowies in general, mostly from our web team. We got some feedback and a few other people from around the traps right in with a few ideas.
I think it's because we have both of our stores in the warehouse and the head office, unless you can eyeball people and be like, what is your recipe?
Give me your answer.
And you're just chucking it on like Teams or whatever to be like, hey guys, then you don't really get an answer.
There's probably a bunch of people who've still got it on their to-do list, but because you posted it yesterday and we're filming today. Did I say that out loud? But that's okay. We got some great ideas. So these were just designed to be really simple meals that you can kind of buy stuff at the last minute and you don't have to go overly prepared.
And they're things that we cook.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. So you go first. Take it away, Benji.
So one of our favourites for camping, really simple, and that's just to cook gnocchi with a pesto sauce.
Yeah, right.
Now then, how good it is depends on what gnocchi you buy.
Okay.
Usually we get like the shelf stable one because it doesn't require refrigeration, right?
Good idea.
You could probably buy refrigerated stuff or your favourite gnocchi if you've got a fridge. But we just get, I think the brand's Guzzi's, Guzzis or something.
Okay.
There's one in particular that we like. So we go, well, now that the kids are eating more, we get 2 packets of that.
Yep.
A jar of basil pesto. You could use sun-dried tomato pesto, I suppose, if you like. No fridge stuff so far. Some pine nuts. Toasted pine nuts are best. So if you can, I guess it's not really one pot if you're going to toast them because then you need your fry pan to toast them
pre-toasted.
as well. But you could pre-toast them, but just normal pine nuts are fine. And then some parmesan. And now the parmesan, I prefer to use refrigerated parmesan. So the pre-flaked stuff in a bag.
The dry stuff that's like a powder is in the cupboard is no good.
Look, you could use it, but it's not a fan. It's not real flash. So, but the parmesan in the bag travels pretty well anyway. Cheese is pretty good. So even if you just had an esky, it'd probably be all right. So now it's one pot in that you cook the gnocchi, you drain the gnocchi, you leave it in your strainer or whatever. That's the only thing is if you No, sorry, you can if you drain the water out of the billy. We cook it in a billy.
Yeah.
And then you can just put the pesto and stuff in there.
Yeah, you don't need to use more than one thing.
Mix it all together. Put the cheese in on top or before if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Easy. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Your turn.
That sounds like something that you could sort of mix and match. You know what I mean? It's like a good base recipe. You could change it up or add different things or whatever.
Yeah, you can use a tomato
anything.
Tomato pasta sauce or something if you like. Yeah. Yep.
Just on this, I'm going to give one of our listeners a shout out and she'll probably be super excited about it. But Coralie, she recently did a video where she made gnocchi, but she uses pantry pesto. Now, she got the link off somebody and I looked at it and it's brilliant. It's like a dried pesto mix that is pantry stable that you can mix with water or put into your recipes.
Oh, wow.
And it's not exactly the same as jarred pesto, but it's good for camping and sort of never goes off and you can have it forever anyway. So thanks, Coralie, because I saw that and I thought that was brilliant.
Pantry pesto.
Pantry pesto. It's you make it yourself.
But if you make a pesto, make some like a chunky pesto or something really nice, and that obviously makes the meal so much better because it's the sauce that makes it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yep.
So my first one is nachos.
Oh yeah.
In a camp oven, you can also do it on a stove. But I think if you were going to do it on the stove, you would still probably need to use cast iron or like a deep cast iron pan, only because I feel like you need to put it on low for a little bit longer because you're sort of replicating an oven, right? And so if you're using cast iron on a stove, it just will heat slower and radiate a bit more and do you know what I mean?
You sort of need that heat from the top to melt the cheese down.
Yeah. And sort of you want to sort of – it's like almost you're baking the whole thing, right?
Yep.
But I got this recipe off the internet ages ago and it's a good favourite, especially if you summer camping at dinner or if you are like winter camping at lunch or whatever. But basically it's just corn chips, obviously, and a tomato sauce like sometimes if I'm doing nachos at home, I use a can of chopped or crushed tomatoes, but I think for this one it's a bit too wet. So something more like a passata or like a thicker tomato sauce, and you can get it plain and add Mexican spices or you can buy like a Mexican tomato pasty saucy thing.
What would be a good passata? Some of them are quite watery. So
some of them are quite watery. Passata. So I think if it's too watery, corn chips go a bit soggy. So not too wet for your tomato sauce. And then things like beans, tinned beans or whatever, chopped herbs. So sometimes I like to be fancy and take fresh herbs and I just put them in a Ziploc bag and I fold some paper towel in the Ziploc bag as well, which sucks up any extra moisture and they stay fresher for a bit longer.
Yeah, nice.
But otherwise, obviously, you can take dried herbs, things like spring onion and coriander, obviously. Avocado. Cheese. You can probably add things like fresh tomatoes or whatever else you want to it. And I also like to add chicken because what I usually do is and I would – also add in here that a lot of my recipes use a vac sealer just because I've got one and it's really easy. So often I'll roast or buy barbecue chicken or a couple before a camping trip and I'll tear it all up and then I'll vac seal a couple of different pockets of it. So it's nice and tight, sits in the fridge or the freezer or whatever. And then just chuck that in. But it's like you do your tortillas and then you do your sauce and your toppings and a little bit of cheese and then you do tortillas again. So you sort of layer it like a lasagna and then you bake it and it just becomes this pot of like amazingness.
Nice.
And then obviously you can do something like chorizo sausage.
Yeah, mix it up.
But then it just occurred to me when I was writing this up. Do you remember episode 55 with Kate Grara when we talked about food for adventure?
Yep.
And she was talking about how she cooks mince but then dehydrates it.
Yep.
And there's I think, was it breadcrumbs or there was something she added to it to make it
yes, that's
rehydrate
right. I can't
really
remember,
well.
but she did say something,
But I'm like, I just thought having well prepped dehydrated mince like that would be an awesome thing to do for your one pot nachos. It just occurred to me that would be brilliant. So I think I might try that out.
Yeah, I think dehydrated mince is quite a versatile thing to have. You can buy packets of it from like backcountry cuisine. Yeah. But it's quite a versatile thing to have in your kit.
Yeah. So, that's my first recipe and it's pretty popular. It's really good. And of course, cheese in a bag, you know what I mean?
And
Ziploc bag.
That can be made to vegetarian or whatever. Like you could add Mexi beans or something in there as well if you wanted. So
totally.
Yeah, great. Mine is next one is quesadillas. So not a pot, more cooked on like a hot plate, but you're only using one hot plate, so a fry pan, or we use a grill plate on top of our gas stove. So just a heap of tortillas, and we clean the table and just lay out a heap of tortillas, and then you get Mexi beans. So it's like a mixed thing.
Do you mean like refried beans? So it's like a bean paste?
Well, you can use that, but what I prefer to make it a little sort of more
chunkier?
Sort of texture and chunkier is I think it's like an Edgel brand, I reckon, just called Mexican bean mix or something, and it's got like kidney beans and black beans and a whole mix of them in there.
Yeah, right.
So it's not hot, but I guess you could get like spicy ones if you like, or just red kidney beans or whatever you like in there. Now the recipe we have at home is we actually like mix it up and make like a paste, but when you're camping it's a bit harder, so we just kind of mashed it a little bit. But you can have the chunky beans in there, it's fine. So then you just spread the beans on the tortillas. Tomatoes, fresh tomatoes if you like, but canned tomatoes, and go into that watery thing again. If you get cheap canned tomatoes, they're quite watery. If you get good quality canned tomatoes, it costs a little bit more. They're still pretty cheap, but get like an Australian one that's actually Australian tomatoes, like an Ardmona or one of the Australian brands. Yeah. It's actually chunky tomatoes, and you can scoop it out and spread it on there. Coriander on top of that, and then cheese on each one. With the cheese, I was going to mention before, if you buy the bags of grated cheese, a little bit more expensive, but saves grating it.
Saves so much mess. Yeah, totally.
And then those bags become a rubbish bag after as well.
They also come with, I just think it's worth saying, they also come with loads of air in them initially. So if you just open them and you can squeeze all the air out, they can pack really compressed.
Yeah. And the cheese kind of squashes, but it all just breaks up again afterwards.
Yeah.
Put cheese on it, fold it in half so you've got like a semicircle.
Oh, yeah.
And then just I could fit 4 at a time on my grill plate, flip them over, cut them in half. The kids loved them. So
that's a really good idea.
Really simple. And so refrigeration was only the cheese really and the coriander.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yep.
Right. So this is just a fairly generic one-pot wonder is soup, right? Mm-hmm. You can make so much variations of soup. So I like to, as you would know if you've watched us or listened to us in the past, I like to do as much prep as I can before I leave home. So some of these things, like for example, when I just mentioned nachos before, like little spice jars or herb jars, but the long skinny ones. Mm-hmm. If you're regularly doing something like making nachos and you want to use a Mexican spice mix, maybe you're not getting it off the shelf, but maybe like paprika or do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Make your own little jar of a spice combination that's just for that meal.
Yep.
And if that's a meal that you're making regularly, you don't have to worry. Yeah, so you've got like you can have your salt and your pepper and your Mexican spice or whatever. So that's sort of like the things with soups. If you're going to do like a chunky winter veg soup or whatever, you can have like a little soup mix and it's got thyme and oregano and salt and pepper and all that sort of jazz in it. But anyway, I generally pre-prepare the veg wherever possible and I vac seal it. So for example, with a soup, I would have pumpkin, potentially some potato, celery, carrots, onion, sort of all pre-chopped for that meal, and I vac seal it all in one single bag.
Yep.
So all I need to do is just whip it out and chuck it in the pan and start cooking it off. I use garlic in a jar, so I don't have to stress too much about that. And more often than not, I don't really bother refrigerating it unless it's like super hot because we use it heaps anyway. Mm-hmm. And again, sometimes if it's going to be super juicy, having a paper towel in there is really cool. It's like like those moisture sachets type
silica
thing.
gel things,
yeah, but it's quick and easy and cheap.
So is this just a chunky soup that you make? Because like if you make a pumpkin soup, usually you like litz it at the end
it's
to
more
make
just
it
like
thick,
a chunky soup, like a country veg or hearty winter soup or any of that sort of stuff. And the reason why I like it is because you can have loads of variations with what you're using. So
lentils and
stock cubes because they're shelf stable and you can have them forever. The thing that I do with meat, so like if I'm going to do a beef or a chicken or whatever, I would prep and cut all the meat up already into diced little bits and then I vac seal it. But sometimes what I would do, especially with the chicken, is I just put olive oil in with the diced meat with salt and pepper So it sort of sits there and marinates, and I put it in the fridge before we go away. And then when we go away, I chuck it in the freezer so it can go longer if it needs to go in the freezer. But then, that way you're emptying your bag with all your pre-chopped vegetables. You're emptying your bag with your pre-chopped meat. You're mixing it around, chucking your stock cube in, putting some water in.
Just boil it.
Just boil it away.
Yep.
You can also do add tomato if you want.
Yep.
Beans, lentils, much variation.
Great option for the campfire because you can just leave that pot simmering away on a few coals.
Yeah, totally.
And the longer you cook it, I guess it
the
thickens up a bit and the more tasty it gets. Yeah.
And I think it's just one of those things that you can use the same premise and make 3 or 4 different soups for the trip. You
can take heaps of shelf-stable items. Beans and lentils, and you can buy just packets of soup mix that have got a whole mix of soup things.
I mean, even if you just wanted to do potatoes and onions and lentils and some meat, you don't necessarily have to take celeries or zucchinis or other things that might not be as shelf stable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. My next one's all these meals are pretty simple, and most of these have been stripped right down so the kids will eat it, which means it's absolutely bare basics, but just a tomato and veg pasta. So take some pasta. Some of it cooks quicker than others, but we just like to take a San Remo, just a good pasta, and a mix of vegetables that the kids will like. So usually for us, that's we're starting off with an onion that you fry off, some capsicum, and obviously a canned tomato, mushrooms as well. We'll throw mushrooms in there. Yep. So these are fridge items. Mushrooms travel okay. You got to be careful how you put them in the fridge. And maybe
you could probably use dehydrated mushrooms.
You could probably. I haven't I say I haven't tried it. I have tried it for hiking meals, dehydrated mushrooms. You got to boil it for a bit longer. Yeah. But I mean, fresh mushrooms are okay. And I guess all of this, if you had a vacuum sealer like you've done, you can chop all this beforehand. Chuck in whatever veg you want in there. Usually I'd like to throw some olives and stuff in there as well, but my youngest doesn't like olives, so that's another thing that's been stripped out. So just chuck all that in. But going to the one pot sort of theme, cook your pasta, boil your pasta. I do like to cook the sauce a little bit. So you do need a colander or something to strain the pasta into while you cook your pasta sauce. So it's potentially a 2-pot meal, this one, but still pretty straightforward. Yeah. Fry the onion off, good canned tomatoes again, your veggies in there, boil that for a while with herb spices. I usually take oregano or just a mixed herb mix, but I prefer to take some oregano, salt, pepper. And I usually have a bit of veggie stock as well. So put some veggie stock in there. Boil that to make a sauce, put your pasta back in, mix it all together, and then cheese on top.
I have heard of people doing the same thing but not cooking the pasta separately, like making the sauce and it being a bit wetter but then just putting the pasta straight into the sauce.
It's interesting you say that, and I've made a note. Actually, I did make a note. I made a mental note for the next meal because I wrote it down and I went, technically that's 2 pots. But then I thought, it could be 1 pot, so I'll get onto that my next one.
Yeah, I have heard about a lot of people doing that, of 1 pot pasta. And for me, I'm like, mind blown. You can't cook pasta in something that isn't boiling water. What? But obviously you can.
Well, if there's enough water in there, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the pasta doesn't soak up much water.
Yeah.
So I guess you got to be careful how watery you make it. Otherwise it's going to be tomato
bolognese
pasta soup.
So my next recipe is white bean and lamb shank stew. Now, admittedly, this isn't a camp specific recipe. I just got it out of one of those Coles magazines, the free magazine or whatever that they have with all of their recipes at their shop. Or I think I took it from my mum because I don't shop at Coles, and she sometimes shops at Coles, and she had it at her house, and I was like,
so you need a 240 volt electric oven for it, but you've just got it's really good. I'm going to write it here.
You definitely don't. This one is a campfire one though, I think, just purely because of how sort of long you leave it on the fire and it sort of stews and what have you. I'm sure you could potentially do something similar on the stove if instead of shanks maybe you're going to use diced lamb or something, and it would cook off a bit easier. But
I love these meals that you get ready early in the day. If you just kick around the campsite, you prep it at lunchtime, leave it cooking for hours, and then by the time it gets cool in the evening, you rug up, sit down and just get straight into the meal.
I know.
There's no prep, no wash, or there's wash up, I suppose you could do it the next day, but
There's something really good about that, I think, especially when you just camp somewhere, there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to be, you're just at your campsite, you just have your fire and you just –
prepping food's one of the things you
it's just so yum. Yeah, it's so good. Yep. Yeah. So similar to the soup, with this sort of stuff, I try and prep my vegetables differently. So like, I'm pretty sure with this one I have onion and celery and a bit of pumpkin, and that's about it, or onion, celery and carrots, nothing else too much on that. And then obviously you garlic from the jar and you just sort of cook it, stir it around in your pot, fry it off a little bit, and then you pop your spices in. I use thyme and a bit of spring onions and a bit of oregano, I think, from memory. And then mostly from there you just put a tiny bit of stock in, and then you just put your shanks in, and then you put the lid in, and then not far before serving it up, you chuck your white beans in.
Mm-hmm.
You can use like giant butter beans or cannellini beans or whatever. And then white wine's usually good. I know that sounds a bit fancy because you might be camping, but if you're someone who drinks white wine already, or, something, even if potentially if you drink red wine and you take a tin of tomatoes, you could add tin of tomatoes and red wine and make it more of a tomato-y stew. Like it's also versatile in that sense. But obviously oil, salt and pepper, all that basics. And then, just leave it in there and you stew it away. And then, as I mentioned, you add your beans a bit later and you stew it a bit, and then you serve it up. It's really delicious.
Do you reckon like a white wine vinegar or something would be a replacement for white wine? Because I've made sauces at home before, and when I haven't had red wine, I've just put a splash of not a cup of vinegar. It's but just a splash to get the flavour, and it's
potentially.
Right.
I've not used it before.
I'm not a chef, so I'm just sort of I'm in the cupboard just going, I don't know, I'll just see how that goes.
See how that goes. Yeah. Honestly, I don't know about a white wine vinegar instead. I don't know, because that's a really good question.
I've done it for bolognese sauce, and I did it just on the weekend and just put a splash of red wine vinegar instead of red wine because I didn't want to open up a whole bottle of wine.
Did it work nice?
It's nice, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yep. That's fine. So, I like that one. That one's really delicious.
And my next one's a vegetarian chili. Now, you can obviously make this into meat by just adding mince. I got this off, we camped at the Fink Desert Race many, many years ago, and we're out there with some American friends because there's a lot of American contingent in Alice Springs, and he cooked these two chilies, one meat and one vegetarian, because my wife doesn't like the flavour of red meat.
Right.
And it's really simple, and we've kind of made it as a staple ever since. The only variation is that when the kids come along, it turned from vegetarian chili to just sort of some tomato vegetable stew
vegetarian,
on rice.
Not chili.
So I've gotten around that by just taking a bottle of sriracha with me wherever I go, and then I just load mine with sriracha afterwards, and everyone else just has
their normal
the plain meal. But
vegetarian chili minus the chili.
That's it, yeah. So we still call it veg chili. We keep saying we're having veg chili, but it's just no chili in it. It's just onion. So fry off the onion, then a capsicum, zucchini, a can of corn.
Yep.
A can of red kidney beans.
Mm-hmm.
All in the pot. Add about a cup of stock and a can of tomatoes. Once again, good quality tomatoes make us all the difference. And just boil that down till it becomes a bit thicker.
Yep.
And you would add chili powder in there beforehand if you were adding the chili to that, and then whatever other salt, pepper that you like. And now this goes on rice, so this is where it's kind of like you probably cook the rice separately. But then I thought, well, it's quite watery when you first cook it, right? So you could probably play around with adding maybe a little bit more water and then just chucking the rice in with the chili and just cooking this big rice chili economy all in one.
Like risotto-y type thing.
Yeah.
And
why
just
boil it down. It's quite watery by the time you put all the stock and everything in there.
Especially if maybe you get rice that's already part cooked. I mean, I've not personally ever used it before, but I know that could be quite handy if you want to sort of limit your gas consumption. I
find that rice doesn't taste real good, but if you've got it in a meal like this, it's probably okay. By itself, it's not as good as just fresh cooked rice, but in a meal like this is probably fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I only just had this moment of cooking the rice in the sauce makes so much sense because I don't have to clean that sticky pot that you have after you've cooked rice in it, right? Yeah. It's just the one pot. And now I've just been traveling for 4 months. I don't know how many times we would have had this while we were traveling. And I wished I'd done this.
Yeah.
But then to top it off, sour cream on top. So,
oh, yum.
So it's
that's delicious.
This is one of those meals you probably make ahead a little bit and just let it simmer away for a while. The longer you let it simmer, the better the flavors get, especially if you've got chili in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a favorite of ours.
Brilliant. So there's a couple of other, not our recipes, but there's a couple of other recipes that people around the traps here at Snowy's do frequently.
Yeah, I like Bronnie's.
So Bronnie, her favourite is mac and cheese. Now, it's not just a bowl of mac and cheese, right? But she does use the mac and cheese off the shelf, the part like the macaroni with the sauce powder and all that sort of jazz.
Yep.
And it's good because apparently there's a vegan option. And so because Bronnie is I don't know, like she doesn't do dairy, or I don't know, she's not vegan, but she does have food intolerances. So
gluten and stuff, I think,
the vegan one or whatever it is, it covers all of that, which is good. And that's her base. So from there she would add any sort of veggies that can either be fresh or tinned or whatever. And then she chucks in some herbs and spices for flavours depending on what sort of taste she's going for, and then a tin of tuna.
Easy.
So I imagine it would probably have a bit of a tuna mornay vibe to it.
Probably. You could, if you wanted to get tricky, you could probably kind of bake it in a camp oven or something.
You probably could.
Cheese on top.
Like it'd be like a tuna bake or something.
Yeah, many ways to cook it. Those on the veggies, I've talked about fresh veggies, but we did use canned veggies while we were away once again, because once the fridge was empty, we had to resort to non-refrigerated stuff.
Yeah.
Not real good by themselves, but if you mix it with enough sauce, they're okay, and the kids got some veggies. So can of good quality, like go for the good brands of mixed vegetables. So you can use that in any of these meals.
Potentially if you have enough room in your freezer, you could use frozen veggies.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a good one. Like I don't carry freezer, but that's not a bad idea.
But if you're going for like a longer trip and you do have a freezer option, maybe you got a dual zone or something like that, you can get like a bag of broccoli and beans, and you know what I mean? Like even you can get stuff.
Veg is better than the canned one.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So next was Kyle, who's a social media guy, and there's a funny conversation between you and Kyle when he just wrote ravioli, and you've gone, what, just ravioli by itself, nothing on it? And he's like, no, Lauren, I put sauce with it.
Yeah.
But I think he was
this is when I was sort of like, one pot, because in my mind, one pot is like you have a pot and you just chuck everything in basically and away you go. But, you know, obviously some of your recipes and Kyle's recipe, it's like you boil it and then you strain it and then you add stuff to it, and then, do you know what I mean? Like you're only using one pot.
Yeah, so but you might need a bowl or something to
maybe it's still between. Is it still a one pot? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. We didn't really
if you're using one pot, but you might be using a whole range of other stuff, but you're only just using a pot to cook, does that count as a one pot meal?
I don't know. We didn't really put strict parameters around it.
No, we didn't.
So,
but still,
maybe ignore the title of the episode and just go with easy camp meals.
Nah, I think it's fine.
But I think Kyle was referring to probably, and I've cooked these a bit too, but just the easy to get like Latina or those pre-packets.
The packets of
meals,
Rav or tortellini or whatever.
Cook really quickly, and you can get a sauce to go with it, either by the sauce that they have, or you could make your own. Really, we just made our own once again from canned tomatoes and veggies. Make your own sauce, chuck the ravioli in.
Yeah.
So you boil the ravioli and then put it in your second knot pot.
I think Kyle made a point to say that he boils it in salty water though.
Yeah. Excuse me. Do you know why?
No.
Well, I think I do, but I've just realised I've got to explain it now. Salt water lowers the boiling point of water. Now, someone's going to jump in and go, technically you're not right there, and they'll correct me on this. But
which is fine. I don't mind.
The salt water will boil quicker. It changes the boiling point. So it boils quicker.
Okay. That's good to know.
I think that's the main reason. Maybe also for a bit of flavour. But, yeah, put it in salt water, strain it, sauce and simmer it for a little bit. But we've just chucked the sauce in there and sort of mixed it all together and warmed it all up.
As long as, like, I think when Kyle was like simmer it, just simmer until the sauce is warm enough for you to eat basically.
We should call it one burner meals. So you're cooking everything just on one burner.
Yeah, but then what if I use 2 fry pans and a saucepan, but I just still use one burner?
Well, then just it's not one pot, is it? You're confusing things now.
And then obviously cheese if you want. If I get Parmesan cheese, like the shivers.
You
Me
did
and
that
this pen.
Was that the second this time episode or did you do that earlier
I think
today?
it was the other episode. I think I need to get a new pen. But if you get Parmesan cheese in like the wedge and it's hard, I don't mind not refrigerating that.
Yeah, if it's cool.
If you've got it in like not damp, if you've got it in a cool sort of dry place, which for me it's sort of under the mattress, it's fairly well insulated.
You're lying to go, it's just lump under my it's the cheese.
Like in the drawer under the mattress. I don't store my cheese under my mattress.
This is why you've got possums in your van overnight because of the cheese under your mattress.
No, in the cheese goes, the hard cheese that doesn't require refrigeration goes in the drawers that are under the bed platform that is cool and dark.
I think we're quite fussy about, in Australia, because of the heat, we carry a lot of cheese refrigerated. I've got a German friend who rocks up and she just pulls cheeses out of
her hammock.
Out of her handbag and stuff. We're like, should we
out
be
of a zippered cheese pocket on a chair?
Yeah, probably. I mean, cheese is... use your own judgment, really.
Yeah.
But hard cheese in particular, I think you're
well, in
safe.
Australia, we do have 40+ degree temperatures.
You wouldn't, if the cheese is melting or 40 degrees, then maybe not.
If the cheese is sweating, maybe put it in the fridge. Right, moving on. We're getting a bit silly. So our other Ben.
Other Ben, yeah.
So Ben actually it runs the blacksmith workshop.
Yep.
So his go-to one pot wonder is paella. Or paella.
That's a rice sort of dish, isn't it?
It's like a – if you don't know what it is, I think the easiest way to describe it is that it's the Spanish version of a risotto but drier. So if like a risotto and a fried rice had a baby in Spain, it would be paella.
So if I cook the veggie chili enough, it'd go from veggie chili to risotto to paella?
Maybe.
Or am I overthinking that?
So basically...
just move on. That was a stupid comment, Ben.
I did move on we could have just let it slide, but you had to point it out.
Yeah.
Oil, onion, garlic, cook it all off. You use your stock cubes depending on what meat you're using. Like if you're making chicken, then use chicken stock cube, whatever. Medium grain rice. I think sometimes they say use paella rice, but it's actually just medium grain rice. So just buy medium grain rice. Same with sushi. If you're going to make sushi, don't buy sushi rice, just buy medium grain rice.
It's different though. Sushi rice is stickier.
It's the same thing. And I got that from an actual Japanese man who's come to Australia and who is a chef. He said just buy medium grain rice. It's the same. Anyway, moving on.
We'll have that conversation after.
Yeah, you can use things like roasted capsicum and sun-dried tomatoes for the paella, which you can get in a jar or in a tin, which makes it easy. Olives, you can use frozen peas. Primarily, it's sort of like a chorizo or a chicken or a prawn. Like I've not really come across any red meat apart from chorizo. Haven't come across any like beef paellas or whatever in my time. Dried herbs, and it's usually just something that you just chuck all in one pot and you just sort of stir it around or you let it simmer until the rice absorbs all the water.
I can see that cooking best in like a big sort of high-sided fry pan or a wok or something like that, so you can something like that because there's quite a lot of ingredients in one pot.
I think traditionally it's cooked in like a huge, like 60 centimetre diameter steel pan over a burner or whatever.
Yeah.
So you could do that over your fire in a big pot, or you could do it on your camp stove. I guess it depends how much you want to make.
I remember seeing one like that at Adelaide Central Markets recently. It's just a massive round pot with
so delicious.
Amazing.
But also, I mean, I said prawns, but you can get small frozen bags of prawns and things like that, which can sometimes make a nice alternative when you're away camping. People don't necessarily go, oh, prawns, but if you do have that freezer element, or even if you have a fridge and you're going to cook it in the first day or two.
Yeah. We haven't mentioned any other
do something a bit fancy.
Fish options here, have we? But I reckon if you've caught fish, it's best just cooked.
Just chuck it on the grill.
Fresh
Yum.
fish fillet.
Yeah, but it's not fish isn't really a one pot wonder type thing.
No, I mean, you could cook like a stew or something like that. But I don't know if you've caught nice fish. I don't know if you'd want to like you put chunky fish in a stew. But
I've made a real nice one pot wonder stew.
Have you?
Yeah, with fish, but that's spearfishing because you can't really get them very easily on a line because they're vegetarian fish.
Okay.
But anyway, let's move on.
So I haven't included this because it involves a pot, a spearfish and a large knife.
Basically.
Anyway, and Kirsty who's in customer service said Stroganoff, can't go wrong. I assume she just means get some chopped up.
And I didn't get the full recipe off of Kirsty, but basically she said she's done it in a pressure cooker or a slow cooker or whatever, and she's yet to try it in a camp oven, but that's basically what she's a massive fan of, because ultimately it will work the same way.
Yeah, okay. So they're all simple recipes.
Yeah.
We'll say if you want to get some professional recipes and some really mouth-watering meals with lots more complex ingredients, check out Harry Fisher's book.
Yeah.
From Fire to Fork, because he's got some cool campfire recipes on there. But these are straight from the minds of Snowy's stuff, and just easy things that
I did say to our boss that we need to make a Snowy's cookbook.
Oh yeah.
That would be so fun.
Nice
and he was like, yeah, maybe. I was like, come on, get around it.
Maybe we'll get the rest of the community onto it.
Yeah, maybe.
And we can put the votes in front of him. And
then
agreed. He'll probably come back to us, fire coming out of his ears saying, why did you say that on the episode? Because now the peer pressure's on.
It's fine. It's fine. Sorry.
All right. We're done.
Yeah, we're done. That's our One Pot Wonders episode. I hope that gives a bit of a good roundup for you, Jenny, and anybody else who's interested, because obviously lots of people liked Jenny's suggestion. So if you have a One Pot Wonder that you love, whether that be on the campfire or on the stove, chuck it in the comments below or jump onto the Facebook group and let us know if you're willing to share, because I want to try them out.
Cool.
Thanks for joining us. See you next week.
See you later.